Amidst the swirling galaxies of the known universe, deep within the glowing cosmic tapestry of suns and stars, lay the celestial empire of Veydra. The planet Veydra itself was a shimmering jewel suspended in a mantle of violet clouds, known for its soaring crystal towers and expansive gardens that seemed to breathe with otherworldly light. Veydra had once thrived under benevolent leadership, its inhabitants known for both regal grace and advanced psychic abilities that set them apart from other star-faring civilizations. These gifts allowed them to commune silently with one another, weaving entire societal structures through silent consensus, for they could glean each other's intentions before words were ever spoken. This existence had, for generations, engendered harmony and understanding among the Veydrans, though also planted the seeds of subtle prejudice beneath the polished surface of their society. Zyra, the last princess of Veydra, lived under this regal canopy of starlight and psychic echoes, and yet, from a tender age, she felt the burden of ostracism. Her parents had once ruled with wisdom, but upon their sudden passing, rule shifted to her stepbrother, Kale, who served as regent. Kale, stern and tall, claimed to protect Veydra's legacy, but secretly he harbored resentment toward his smaller, younger sister. Whereas the people of Veydra were typically statuesque, slender, and adorned with luminescent markings on their temples that pulsated with the flow of their telepathic energy, Zyra stood barely at the shoulder of most. Petite of stature, she faced veiled smiles and condescending remarks that sliced deeper than any blade. Whispers trailed her in the hallowed palace corridors, murmurs that she was unfit, a diminutive embarrassment. These murmurs shaped her youth, weaving a quiet sorrow through her heart. Yet Zyra was not powerless. Even at her smallest and most uncertain moments, she possessed a latent gift that outmatched most of her people's telepathic abilities. In hushed corners of the palace library, she would study ancient texts that spoke of advanced psychic resonance, mind shields, telekinetic bursts. Though she kept her growing talents hidden, she sometimes felt the energies flicker within her, warming her thoughts with invisible flames. Kale, while not attuned to these texts, still sensed something in Zyra, some intangible current that made her a threat. As regent, he ensured that her voice was seldom heard in matters of state, keeping her at arm's length so that she might not ascend to her rightful inheritance. And so the tapestry was set, a quiet strife tinged with the glimmer of jealousy and hidden might, until one day, Kale concocted a plan to rid himself of Zyra altogether. Putting forth a false rumor that an alliance must be struck with the lesser-known star system of Rylan, he declared a grand diplomatic mission. He insisted Zyra be the emissary, citing that the princess's gentle presence would surely facilitate trade and peace. Confusion drifted across the palace, for never before had an untested, younger royal been thrust into such a negotiation. Still, the courtiers bowed to Kale's commands, for no one dared challenge the regent openly. Zyra, though anxious, was also eager, seeing it as an opportunity to prove her worth. Naively, she believed that forging an interstellar alliance would win her the respect she'd so long craved from both her brother and the Veydran Council. Thus, preparations began with great pageantry. A modest, elegant star yacht was assembled, on the surface, equipped with fine provisions and a hand-picked, loyal crew. Yet beneath the vessel's silken facade, sabotage was brewing. Kale had orchestrated every detail of her departure, and his meddling fingers ensured that critical systems remained unsteady, primed to fail at the worst possible time. Excitement filled Zyra's heart on the day of the departure, though she sensed, faintly, the rancid stench of deceit. Still, with few true allies, and with hope burning bright in her chest, she did not question her stepbrother's arrangements. She believed, almost desperately, in the chance to be seen as valuable. When at last the vessel departed from Veydra's orbit, its crystalline hull shimmering in the starry void, Zyra watched her homeland shrink away through the observation deck's window. Her chest tightened with mingled fear and hope. Would she return a hero, ushering in a new golden age of unity? Or would she return the same outcast, overshadowed by the throne of her stepbrother? The question weighed upon her heart, an ache tempered only by her lingering dream that, perhaps, in traveling beyond Veydra's boundaries, she might discover her own strength, a power waiting to bloom far away from the suffocating stares of her own people. Weeks passed in silent routine, the star yacht crossing unimaginable distances. Starlight waltzed across the polished floors, and the small crew busied themselves with mundane tasks. Zyra spent most of her time reading the palace documents about Rylan, memorizing local customs, and trying to sharpen her telepathic skill so that she might handle diplomacy with care. In quiet moments, she would press her palm against the hull, letting her psychic senses unfurl into the cosmic darkness, sensing the hum of distant stars. How she loved the endless tapestry of existence, for it made her own pains feel small, and yet kindled inside her a growing sense that life was a gift meant for more than shame. But Kale's sabotage had not been idle. More than once, the star yacht's engine flickered, systems froze, or unexplained malfunctions shook the craft. One night, while Zyra was deep in study, alarms blared. She rushed to the command deck, where frantic attendants explained that the warp core had gone critical. Fear gripped her. She could sense the chaotic swirl of terror in the crew's minds, but her attempts to calm them telepathically barely penetrated their panic. Even so, she encouraged them, guiding them with quiet urgency. They managed a desperate emergency jump, recalculating coordinates in haste. The star yacht tore through subspace, the hull groaning from unimaginable pressures, then emerged, battered and shuddering, near an uncharted planet cloaked in swirling green and brown clouds. They had no choice but to land, for precious life support systems were failing. Landing, however, quickly unraveled into a jarring crash. The sabotage ensured that stabilizers failed and navigation software sputtered. Metal shrieked as the star yacht impacted the surface. Flames danced at the edges of the hull, while the sky above churned with ominous emerald thunder. When at last Zyra opened her eyes, the acrid smell of smoke and static electricity clogged her lungs. She coughed, trembling, fighting to stay awake. Around her, the crew lay lifeless or unconscious, scattered across the broken remains of the command deck. Pain lanced her side as she struggled to stand, but her innate telekinetic instincts flared. She shielded her body from a rain of debris, summoning an unseen force that deflected twisted shards of metal. Adrenaline coursed through her, fueling her hidden powers. Then, in the corner of her awareness, she saw one surviving attendant, a guard named Dareth, gasping for air. Summoning her strength, she stumbled to him. Blood stained his uniform. She pressed her hand lightly to his forehead, attempting to infuse calm and reduce his suffering. But his wounds were far too grave. He gazed at her with sorrow, parted his lips to speak, perhaps to deliver a final warning, yet only a faint rasp emerged. Within moments, his eyes fell shut, leaving Zyra alone, cast upon a world unknown. Outside, the atmosphere groaned with a heavy wind that battered the hull. She found a functioning sensor console, scanning the planet's atmosphere. Trace oxygen, though laden with toxins not lethal in small doses. The temperature was dangerously frigid come nightfall. With trembling fingers, she rummaged through the emergency lockers, retrieving a survival pack, a portable translator device, and a beam lantern. Of the crew's remains, she could scarcely bear to look. Her mind reeled with a single question. Had Kale orchestrated this catastrophe, sacrificing her entire retinue? The thought raged through her, fueling heartbreak like molten steel. There was no time to mourn. She needed to survive, to discover if there was any chance of rescue. Stepping free from the wreckage, Zyra found herself in a sprawling wilderness that looked untouched by civilization. Bulbous plant life dotted a vast plain of dusky soil, each plant crowned with fibrous, vine-like arms that swayed in the toxic breeze. Above, the sky was a swirling mosaic of emerald clouds tinged with violet lightning. Distant ridges of mountainous rock loomed, sending jagged silhouettes across the horizon. Each breath burned slightly in her lungs, so she raised her cloak around her face. Her psychic senses told her that life existed on this planet, prowling, primal life. A faint ripple of savage hunger reverberated across the mental plane, an undercurrent of predatory instincts that nearly made her retch. Nonetheless, she pressed forward, determined to find shelter before nightfall. In the hours that followed, she crested shallow hills, weaving between the bizarre flora that hissed softly when touched. Pain from her bruised ribs flared with each step, yet she pressed on. At last, near a jagged cliff face, she discovered a rocky alcove that offered some measure of protection from the whipping winds. Collapsing there, she rummaged for rations in her survival pack. Exhaustion shadowed her eyes, and a searing ache for her lost companions gnawed at her. Wrapping her arms around herself, she tried to contain the tears. But they came, warm and silent, streaking her cheeks in the lonely gloom. She had been exiled, abandoned, manipulated by the only family she had left. Memories of Kale's cold smirk haunted her. For the first time, a new resolve sank into her heart. She would find a way back to Veydra, confront her stepbrother, and lay bare his treachery. Her resolve, however, was tested that very evening, for as dusk fell, the monstrous predator she had sensed earlier made its presence known. Through her telepathic senses, she felt a wave of primal hunger emanating from nearby. Emerging from the darkness came a towering beast, scaled and covered in pulsating azure veins. Its mouth bristled with saber-like fangs, and its eyes glowed a lurid green. It moved on all fours, each step shaking the ground. Zyra felt panic seize her, but an odd clarity also washed over her mind. The moment demanded her powers. She raised trembling hands, summoning the telepathic energies she had long nurtured in secret. A surge of force erupted before the beast, halting its charge. Yet the creature roared, shaking free from the psychic hold. Fear stabbed through her chest. She had never faced such raw physical power before. Claws raked the earth, inching closer. She strained again, forging a telekinetic wall. For a moment, the monster's snarling maw pressed against the invisible barrier. But cracks of psychic strain formed in her vision. Her power faltered under the fierce assault. She clenched her teeth, pushing back with all her will. Then, abruptly, gunfire rang out, echoing in the night. A bolt of light seared through the gloom, striking the creature's flank. The beast howled in pain, staggering sideways. Another blast followed, and yet another, until the monstrous entity bellowed its final breath and collapsed on the earth with a thunderous crash. Standing behind it, panting, was a solitary figure, humanoid, tall, draped in ragged gear and holding a battered plasma rifle. This stranger stepped forward, shining a small light across the scene. Zyra lowered her shield, eyes wide, heart hammering. She had never seen a human in the flesh before. She only recognized the form from the historical archives of Veydra, where the existence of humankind was briefly documented. "Are you hurt?" the stranger asked, in a language she barely understood. Quickly, she activated her translator device, fumbling with trembling fingers. The device crackled, and then his words became clear, albeit slightly distorted. His voice was rough, and exhaustion lined his features. Dusty blonde hair framed a face marked by old scars. Leather-like attire clung to a rangy form, patched and repaired countless times. He glanced down at Zyra, perplexed by her petite figure and shimmering temple markings. "Who in the blazes are you?" Her breath trembled as she spoke. "Zyra. I thank you. You saved me." The translator device caught her words in Veydran and spat them out in a halting rendition of the human language. He nodded, though confusion lingered in his dark eyes. Then he offered his hand, and she grasped it. His touch felt warm, strong, a lifeline in the planet's brutal wilds. He introduced himself as Rylan, a scavenger stranded on this forsaken world after his freighter crash-landed months ago. He had prowled the planet's wastes, collecting salvage to keep his battered ship running. Yet no matter how much he worked, the craft remained in disrepair, starved of the proper parts. He had learned to survive its dreadful nights by hiding in caverns or his makeshift camp, fending off horrors that roamed the darkness. At times, the planet's storms eased just enough for him to attempt partial repairs, but he had never found a way to leave. Communication was nearly impossible. A planet-wide electromagnetic haze scrambled all signals. And so, by chance, he had spotted the distant glow of her star yacht's crash. Zyra's chest tightened with gratitude and anxiety as she realized her rescue was not yet assured. Yes, she had found a survivor, another castaway, but his presence did not guarantee escape. Nevertheless, his aid in vanquishing the predator saved her life that night, forging an uneasy alliance. Kneeling beside the beast's corpse, Ryland frowned. "I've seen these things take out entire caravans before. You're lucky to be alive. Then, his gaze swept over the battered wreckage of her star yacht in the distance. We should see if there's anything you can salvage. Over the next few days, Zyra followed Ryland through the hostile terrain, returning only briefly to her crashed vessel. Together, they scavenged power cells, medical kits, scraps of alloy plating, anything that might be used to reinforce Ryland's own cobbled-together craft or to provide them both with supplies. Within the shattered compartments, Zyra's heart sank at the sight of her fallen crew, many of whom had perished upon impact. She led Ryland to the star yacht's primary data core, hoping it might hold navigational charts or some clue to help them. He frowned, explaining that any signal would likely be scrambled by the planet's storms, and that even if they repaired the star yacht, the sabotage to its warp drive might be irreversible without specialized parts. A chill passed over Zyra's skin as she realized how meticulous Kale's betrayal must have been. Despite the gloom, a fragile trust grew between them. Zyra found herself marveling at Ryland's resilience, how he managed to hunt for small rodents or gather water from toxic springs, purifying it with portable filters. He showed her how to test the soil for hidden pockets of radiation, how to identify the plants that produced inedible pulp. She, in turn, used her telepathic gifts to sense lurking predators. Though she rarely displayed the extent of her powers, she guided them away from threats, saving them precious energy. Meanwhile, her translator device allowed for more fluid conversation, and Ryland found himself oddly intrigued by this petite, luminescent-marked alien princess who possessed a gentle but unshakable will. In the nights that followed, they huddled around a flickering portable heater, speaking in soft tones that the translator sometimes fumbled. Zyra recounted her life as a princess, the library archives, her longing to be accepted. Ryland listened, nodding, but he seemed guarded when it came to his own past. He spoke vaguely of traveling the galaxy with a salvage crew, of losing friends to a corporate dispute, of wandering into outlying systems in search of fortune. But behind his voice lay a quiet sorrow, the bruise of regrets too heavy to speak aloud. Zyra sensed it in him, a resonance of pain. She sensed, too, that he might understand what it meant to feel adrift, cast aside by one's own fate. By the end of the first week, they reached Ryland's makeshift shelter, a battered transport craft perched near a rocky shelf. It lay half-buried in rubble, with scaffolding of scrap metal forming a protective barrier. Dented solar panels, retrieved from old wrecks, extended from the top. The interior was cramped, but relatively safe. Simple bunks, storage crates, and a half-functional power supply offered a modest home in this hostile world. Exhausted, Zyra sank onto a bunk, while Rylan ensured the perimeter defenses were armed against nocturnal beasts. He then turned to her, rummaging in a crate until he extracted 2 metal cups, each with a small portion of a bitter hot drink. The warmth spread through her hands and into her chest, soothing her exhaustion. To pass the time, Zyra studied the fractured planet from Ryland's vantage, scanning old readouts of the atmosphere's composition, analyzing potential frequencies for distress signals. In doing so, she discovered a faint, coded ping in the planet's electromagnetic haze, something that wasn't from Ryland's systems. Confusion sparked in her eyes. Ryland shrugged, explaining that he had detected it before, but had assumed it was leftover debris from some ancient civilization. Yet, for the first time, Zyra dared to hope. If the signal was artificial, perhaps someone else had landed here, or something valuable remained intact. If they could harness or decipher it, a window for rescue might open. Together, they set out in search of the signal's source. Each day, they journeyed across the rugged lands, guided by the faint pulses that flickered across Zyra's hacked-together sensor device. Time flowed strangely on this planet, the sky shifting from jade-green daylight to swirling black storms at random intervals. More than once, they took shelter from hailstorms that rained down shards of violet ice. Ryland's stoic resolve never wavered, nor did Zyra's determination. Slowly, step by step, they forged a partnership more dependable than either had known before. As they traveled, Zyra's powers continued to grow. She discovered she could not only sense, but also gently nudge the thoughts of the planet's lesser creatures, steering them away without open conflict. At times, Rylan witnessed how a charging beast would suddenly lose interest, turning aside as though forgetting its prey. Though he was grateful for her intervention, he couldn't shake a feeling of awe. In moments like those, he regarded Zyra with a quiet reverence, as though seeing the regal power she had once doubted in herself. She noted the change in his demeanor, an unspoken respect that warmed the loneliness in her heart. Their search eventually led them to a derelict facility hidden within a system of canyons. Rusted towers protruded from the sand, and collapsed walls revealed glimpses of advanced machinery within. The environment reeked of damp decay, with a labyrinth of corridors corroded by centuries of storms. And, at the heart of this ruin, they found the source of the signal, a partially functioning communications array, blinking like a solitary lighthouse in the cosmic gloom. Rylan set to work, bridging wires and rerouting power from his portable cells, while Zyra used her telepathic sense to scan for any immediate threats. Now and then, her temple markings glowed softly, responding to her internal focus. In the midst of these deserted hallways, they encountered evidence of another presence. Footprints, scorch marks, a few scattered rations. Someone else had been here recently. Alarm prickled their senses. Carefully, they continued, discovering a sealed chamber that flickered with energy. Within, they found a small group of ragtag individuals, bounty hunters from the Galactic fringes. Rylan recognized them immediately by their uniforms and the menacing glint in their eyes. The confrontation sparked in an instant. Weapons were raised, harsh words exchanged. Zyra stood behind Rylan, her heart hammering, as the translator sputtered to keep up with the heated dialogue. The bounty hunters were led by a cunning female leader, Tessa Rune, who demanded they relinquish all salvage. She had tracked the same signal, hoping to claim any technology left behind. When Rylan tried to negotiate, Tessa sneered, noticing Zyra's luminous temples. In an instant, Tessa's expression changed from aggression to a predatory greed. Alien royalty could fetch an enormous price on the black market. Humans who disliked certain alien polities, or unscrupulous figures seeking telepathic slaves. There was an entire underworld that might pay handsomely for a Veydran. Rylan realized the danger at once, stepping in front of Zyra protectively. Before the situation escalated, Zyra let her psychic powers flow. She disrupted the bounty hunter's aim, sending a wave of mental confusion. Their weapons wavered. Rylan sprang into action, disarming one, stunning another with a swift blow. The standoff dissolved into chaos as Tessa fired wildly, sparks flying. Zyra focused on Tessa's mind, attempting to lull her into unconsciousness. But Tessa's will was fierce. She clutched a device that emitted a piercing psychic counterwave, causing Zyra to double over in pain. Rylan lunged forward, grappling Tessa. They tumbled across the facility's metal floor. In the frantic struggle, Tessa's device clattered away. Zyra steadied herself, then sent a telepathic pulse that caused Tessa's senses to swirl. The bounty hunter collapsed, gasping. With Tessa subdued, the remaining few either fled or lay incapacitated. Swiftly, Zyra and Rylan claimed the communications array's key components and withdrew, leaving the bounty hunters behind. Adrenaline surged through them both, but dread coiled in Zyra's gut. This was only the beginning. News would spread of a stranded Veydran princess, easy prey for slavers or extortionists. They had to move quickly, find a way off this planet, before forces darker than Tessa's band came hunting. Despite the fear, something else shimmered between them, a deeper trust, perhaps even the beginnings of affection. They had risked their lives for each other now, forging a bond that transcended simple survival. As they trekked back to Ryland's ship, nights turned into weeks, and they continued to refine the salvaged communications array. With Zyra's advanced knowledge of telepathic encryption and Ryland's mechanical savvy, they managed to craft a clandestine beacon that might send an encoded SOS beyond the planet's electromagnetic storms. Every test transmission seemed to fail, but slowly they adapted to the swirl of anomalies, calibrating frequencies and adjusting the array's angle. At last, they achieved a single, stable pulse. Weak, but there. What they never anticipated was who might answer. One storm-lashed twilight, the array's readings began to flicker, indicating a potential incoming vessel. Zyra and Ryland stood on a rocky outcrop, scanning the skies. They saw no ship at first, only swirling clouds, streaked with electric fury. Then a silhouette materialized overhead, a large craft descending with uncanny stability. The ramp lowered. Out stepped figures cloaked in the regal drapery of Veydra, and among them stood Kale, his silver hair catching the flashes of lightning. Zyra's heart lurched. Her stepbrother had come. For a moment, relief warred with suspicion in her mind. Had he received her beacon? Or had he simply traced her path, ensuring his plan was finished? The possibility that he might feign a rescue chilled her. But there he stood, arms outstretched, feigning concern. The words that drifted from his lips were saccharine. "Oh, dear sister, we feared the worst. Come with us. Let us take you home." Rylan tensed beside her, brow furrowed with distrust. He understood none of the words, but he saw the malice behind Kale's masked smile. Swayed by her longing for home, Zyra agreed to accompany Kale to his ship on one condition: Rylan must come too. The regent hesitated but acquiesced, though Zyra sensed his displeasure. As they boarded, Zyra's intuition blared warnings. Why was Kale's ship so heavily armed? Why did the Vadran guards eye Rylan with open contempt? She wanted to confront her brother, demand answers about the sabotage. But the time felt wrong. She needed proof. She needed to be certain. Meanwhile, Rylan pressed closer to her, and she could sense his apprehension. Softly, she squeezed his hand, trying to convey silent reassurance. Once inside the opulent corridors of Kale's craft, Zyra noted how her brother never spoke of the supposed diplomatic mission, nor of the lost star yacht and the murdered crew. Instead, he spun a tale of relief at her survival. Yet his eyes betrayed him, shimmering with smug control. When they reached the command chamber, Kale invited Zyra to a private conversation. Rylan was escorted elsewhere, under the watchful gaze of armed guards. Zyra's stomach churned. Still, she steeled herself, determined to confront Kale with unwavering resolve. Alone in a gilded chamber, the siblings stood face to face. The regent's demeanor hardened, and his mask of concern fell away. He confirmed what she had feared. He had orchestrated her exile. He sneered at her small stature, mocking the notion that she could one day ascend as Queen of Veydra. He admitted that the sabotage was meant to ensure she never returned. And yet, he spat. Like a rat, you survived. But now you've led me to a wondrous opportunity. We have ways to erase your memories, to subdue your mind. With you under my thumb, the council will recognize me as the uncontested ruler. No one will question my regency again. Zyra trembled with rage. Her telepathic abilities surged, luminous swirls igniting at her temples. She demanded he release Rylan and allow them both to leave. Kale laughed, explaining that the human would soon be disposed of or sold off to pay for the losses incurred by sending a rescue vessel. For a moment, her heartbreak threatened to overwhelm her, but she clung to her strength. She realized that she had grown, that her telepathic gifts thrived when she was supported, cared for, and respected. Ryland's presence had emboldened her powers, fueling their expansion beyond what she once imagined. Summoning her will, she struck out at Kale's mind. He staggered, unprepared for the intensity of her psychic force. She seized control of his guards, commanding them telepathically to stand down. For a moment, she thought victory was near, but Kale activated a hidden device, similar to Tessa's, but more advanced, designed to scramble telepathic energies. Pain rippled through Zyra's skull. She fought to maintain control. Sparks erupted from the walls as conflicting energies clashed in the space between them. Kale's mental defenses were formidable, honed by years of practice. He pressed a button, and an alarm wailed through the corridors. Meanwhile, Rylan, confined in a separate chamber with heavily armed guards, heard the alarm and knew danger had arrived. With characteristic grit, he fought his captors. A brawl ensued, plasma bolts firing wildly. Rylan disarmed one guard, using his rifle to stun the rest. Gaining access to the corridor, he raced toward the source of the alarm, guided by the flickering lights and his desperate concern for Zyra. In a swirl of chaos, Zyra found herself cornered by Kale's personal enforcers. They aimed weapons at her, the telepathic disruption device whirring angrily in the background. Summoning her dwindling reserves, she cast out a wave of empathic dissonance, fueling the enforcers' minds with illusions of their worst nightmares. They faltered, giving Rylan the chance to burst into the chamber. He fired at the device, shattering it. Immediately, Zyra's senses cleared. With a fierce cry, She unleashed a telekinetic blast that knocked Kale off his feet. An expression of fury twisted the regent's features. "You would pit yourself against me, you wretched, stunted creature?" he bellowed, lunging forward. His hand seized a ceremonial blade from the chamber's display. With lethal grace, he swung at Zyra. She raised an invisible barrier, but his psychic might battered against it. For a breathless moment, they struggled in a deadlock of energies, lights swirling around Zyra's temples, dark fury radiating from Kale. Then Ryland intervened, tackling Kale from behind, wrenching the blade away. The regent roared, flinging Rylan aside with a burst of telekinesis that cracked the walls. But in that fleeting second, Zyra seized control of Kale's mind, plunging into his thoughts with renewed determination. She forced him to see his betrayals, his illusions, his darkest shame. His defiance crumpled, and he collapsed, unconscious. The battle was done. The alarm still howled. The ship rocked by blasts as loyalists clashed with Kale's more vicious enforcers. Yet the worst was over. Zyra breathed heavily, kneeling beside Rylan, who groaned and lifted his head, bruised but alive. Relief flooded her. Gently, she helped him stand, enveloping him in a trembling embrace. He pressed his forehead to hers, and in that moment, no translation device was needed. An unspoken bond, a sense of deep care, flowed between them. Surrounded by the swirl of chaos, they held each other, safe in the knowledge that together, they had faced mortal danger and emerged. Once the ship's security recognized Kale's defeat, many of the lesser guards submitted to Zyra's authority. While the regent lay unconscious, his sabotage was revealed. The Staryacht's logs, recovered by Rylan, showed tampered systems, incriminating him beyond doubt. Word spread among the crew that the last princess had returned, and that Kale's regency was a sham built on murder. The truth could not be denied. Despite the relief of triumph, Zyra trembled at the notion of returning to Veydra. What would her people say? Would the council accept her leadership, or would they remain forever prejudiced against her small stature? Perhaps some would still scorn her. But she also sensed her newfound strength and the loyal hearts of those who saw beyond appearances. Over the next days, she and Rylan nursed their wounds, oversaw the ship's course back to Veydra, and stabilized Kale in the medical bay so that he could stand trial. When Rylan asked if she truly wished to lead her homeland, she paused, acknowledging the weight of duty. But she felt, in her spirit, that she must. If not her, then who would guide Veydra with compassion and justice? When at last they neared Veydra, the planet's violet clouds and crystal spires welcomed them in a blaze of iridescent light. The news of the regent's captivity spread like wildfire. Crowds gathered around the royal palace. Fear mingled with hope as they watched the starship descend. The palace courtyard, glimmering with polished stone, bustled with the hush of thousands of watchers. Veydran guards stood ready, uncertain what to expect. Then the ramp lowered, and out stepped Zyra, petite, regal, eyes gleaming with renewed confidence. Rylan was at her side, a proud sentinel of flesh and blood, unwavering despite the stares of those who had never laid eyes on a human before. A hush fell over the crowd, and then a murmuring wave of astonishment as the princess declared Kale's treachery. Data logs were revealed, telepathic testimonies from the loyal crew were shared. The regent was escorted in chains, powerless to resist. Some in the crowd wept at the betrayal, while others gazed at Zyra with newfound admiration. Her stature had not changed, yet she carried herself with a dignity and authority that commanded respect. The luminous markings at her temples, once ridiculed, shone brighter than any past monarchs. It was as though her trials had unlocked the deeper currents of her lineage, the birthright of a royal Veydran bloodline that thrived on empathy and strength of heart. In the days that followed, the High Council met. Ryland's presence was questioned. After all, humans were not typically part of Veydra's monarchy. Yet Zyra stood firm, explaining how Ryland had saved her life on that hostile planet, how he had proven loyalty, integrity, and compassion. In the face of prejudice, she reminded the council that Veydra's ideals were built on unity and the free exchange of knowledge across the stars. Was it not hypocritical to shun an ally who embodied such virtues, simply because he was different? Moved by her plea and the clarity of her telepathic resonance, the council relented. They saw in Rylan a resolute spirit, and they saw in Zyra an unshakable leader whose empathy was not a weakness but a strength. The trial that followed saw Kale stripped of rank, awaiting further justice for his crimes. Slowly but surely, the people of Veydra began to accept their petite princess, who was forging a path that emphasized genuine communication, beyond telepathy, beyond the arrogance that had allowed prejudice to fester. Zyra encouraged a new form of governance, blending Veydran tradition with a forward-looking openness to cooperation with other species. Her blossoming relationship with Ryland served as a symbol of this union, and though it was not without its critics, many found hope in seeing the princess stand beside the man who had crossed the stars for her. In the lunar garden at the heart of the palace, Zyra and Ryland took quiet moments to simply be. Beneath towering crystal trees that caught and refracted the planet's pale moonlight, they spoke of the future. Ryland shared stories of places he wished to show her beyond Veydra, star systems brimming with wonders unknown. Zyra spoke of how she longed to harness her newly awakened telepathic strength not just for her people, but to foster peace across the galaxy. There were obstacles ahead, of course. External foes, old rivalries, and the delicate nature of forging alliances. But Zyra stood determined. She was no longer a frightened outcast, nor a naive pawn in her stepbrother's schemes. Each passing day seemed to confirm that her love for Rylan was deeper than mere gratitude. Their bond transcended their differences, an interlacing of hearts that bridged the distance between worlds. And Rylan, who once roamed the galaxy in search of meaning, found purpose standing at her side, guiding, protecting, and loving her. No longer would either face the cosmic void alone. Thus began a new era for Veydra, ushered in by the petite princess who had once been shunned, yet discovered her strength in adversity. In the grand throne hall, where the luminous crystals and gilded windows echoed with centuries of tradition, Zyra was officially crowned. The ceremony was unlike any other. Her telepathic aura linked the minds of all who bore witness, so they might experience unity in that moment. Many wept at the shared feelings of hope, empathy, and the promise of rebirth for their society. When the ceremony concluded, Rylan approached, a smile tugging at his usually serious features. He took her hands, gaze brimming with admiration. Before the assembled crowd, in full view of the galaxy's watchers, he bent his knee and pledged his lifelong devotion to her cause, to her heart. She raised him to his feet, and their foreheads touched softly, sealing a vow that transcended any mere royal decree. Cheers rose, echoing through the crystalline halls, and the telepathic wave of goodwill washed over them all like a gentle tide. Peace would not be immediate, nor the road always smooth. Yet as Zyra and Rylan led side by side, they knew the power that had shaped their bond, selfless rescue, mutual respect, and a love that honored each other's strengths. In time, Veydra opened its starports to distant worlds, forging alliances that Kale's fearful regime had once shunned. The telepathic and the technological intertwined, forging new marvels. Bounty hunters, slavers, and other threats lingered in the darker corners of the galaxy, but Zyra faced them without fear, knowing she stood not alone, but with an ally who loved her unconditionally. And so, across the shining spires of Veydra, a hush of awe and celebration reigned. The outcast princess, small in stature but grand in resolve, had returned triumphant. The man from Earth, rugged and resourceful, had found in her a love beyond measure. Together, they would reshape Veydra's destiny and stand united against the trials of the cosmos. Neither would forget the harsh planet that had nearly claimed their lives, nor the savage beasts that roamed its plains, nor the bounty hunters who sought to profit from their misfortune. In those crucibles of danger, their bond had been forged. Now, in the radiant halls of a kingdom renewed, they stepped forward to greet the future. No longer was Zyra overshadowed by towering, dismissive courtiers. No longer did Ryland drift as a scavenger among the stars, uncertain of his purpose. Their path, though filled with challenge, was guided by the simple truth that real power lies not in physical strength or psychic might alone, but in the courage to love and to stand by what is just. As the new queen of Veydra, Zyra vowed to rule with compassion and wisdom, forging harmony not just among her own people, but across the stars where so many still waited in darkness and conflict. When the celebrations finally quieted and the revelers drifted away, Zyra and Rylan found themselves at the highest balcony of the palace. Together they gazed upon the mesmerizing vista of shimmering towers, floating gardens, and the endless expanse of the cosmic ocean beyond. Warm air brushed their faces, carrying the scent of the palace orchards. Zyra's temple markings glowed in subtle rhythm with her steady heartbeat, a silent testament to the new equilibrium she had found within. Rylan, standing close, gently took her hand. He did not need telepathy to sense her emotions, for the reflection in her bright eyes said it all: gratitude, determination, and a quiet, enduring joy. High above them, stars twinkled, ancient and infinite. They had seen the downfall of tyrants and the rise of heroes, and they would bear witness to countless tales yet unwritten. In that moment, Zyra and Ryland shared a smile meant only for each other, a silent vow echoing between their hearts, a vow to cherish what they had found against all odds. The galaxy was vast, as full of wonder as it was of peril, but in each other, they had discovered something rarer than any cosmic treasure, the priceless spark of true acceptance and abiding love. And so they faced the unknown hand in hand, content in the knowledge that even in the darkest corners of the universe, hope can be kindled by the smallest spark. No matter what challenges might arise, no matter what new adversaries might threaten, they would meet them together. In each other, they had found the heart of belonging, and in that union, they turned the page on Veydra's history to write a brighter story for generations yet to come. Thus ended the tale of the exiled princess and the human scavenger, sealed with a promise that transcended worlds. In the grand tapestry of cosmic destinies, their story shone as a testament to courage, compassion, and the boundless power of choosing one's own path, even when the entire galaxy insists it cannot be done. And from that day forward, Veydra stood not in the shadows of prejudice and doubt, but as a beacon of hope, guided by a queen both small of stature and immeasurably great of heart, and by the human she loved, who taught them all the value of forging unexpected bonds under distant, alien suns. With that final note, their story, which began in isolation and despair, reached a triumphant, joyful resolution, proof that even among the swirling stars, happy endings can be found where least expected.